My name is David Ward, and I'm writing a book about discrimination toward disabled people. And I have a couple questions for the candidates.
Let's try one, sir.
Some buildings in the city have automatic doors that don't work the way they should, and then of course they don't work at all. What would you be prepared to do to force these buildings to keep these doors in good working order? And how would you do this?
Okay. We're back at the top of the list in alphabetical order. Mr. Mammoliti, you're first.
This campaign started, I came up with an outrageously touch kind of concept that talked about increasing the amount of enforcement officers that we have in the city. We don't have enough to be able to deal with property standards and other big issues. Some people said that it was outrageous, that I should not have made those kinds of promises. This is one of the reasons that I suggested that. If we had enough enforcement officers to be able to send to make sure that the bylaws that landlords and others are obligated to adhere to, then those doors would be working. The reality is we do have the tools in front of us in the way of policies and bylaws that would force those particular landlords to fix those kinds of circumstances. But the City of Toronto doesn't have enough enforcement officers to be able to go around and deal with it. We need to increase the amount of enforcement officers we have.
Thank you, Mr. Mammoliti. Joe Pantalone.
Well, we have 2.6 million people living in the City of Toronto, and we have an enforcement division for property standards, where this year actually they've done an excellent job. I know the Federation of Metro Tenants, another organization, have praised them for doing an excellent job to get to those negligent landlords or institutional or otherwise who do the job. I would suggest, I'm going to stick around after the meeting. If you give me the addresses of those properties, I'll make sure it gets looked after. It's totally unacceptable that doors, revolving and otherwise, should not be working properly.
Thank you, Mr. Pantalone. Rocco Rossi.
Well, there's no question the city needs to crack down on those who are not fulfilling their obligations, but they should first lead by example. I mean, I spent a day in a wheelchair recently and tried to go into the St. George subway at the Bedford station, and the so-called automatic door wasn't working and hadn't been working for some time. So Mr. Pantalone should start with the city's own properties and make sure that the city is living up to these standards so that it can set a proper
example.
I think that, you know, if we want to turn the whole question into the idea of how many people can we crack down on this year who have a door installed and it's not working, I think we're missing a pretty big point here. Because the real hardship is the relatively limited number of doors that exist in the first place. When I opened a storefront office with Bob Ray on Parliament Street, we engaged local community members, themselves in wheelchairs, to help us situate the door openers, because best as I know, there wasn't any advice available to us. I think that the city also needs to be very, very proactive. Take the good work that they've done on standards and work with organizations like business improvement areas to assist them and give them the knowledge and the tools to actually get these devices installed well. And then I think in the City of Toronto we need like a broken windows approach. Like you had to crime in New York City with Rudy Giuliani. We got water fountains all over this city that don't work either, that are the city property. And I think the city themselves needs to have a higher standard for making sure their own property is properly maintained.
Thank you, Mr. Smitherman. Sarah Thomson.
Thank you. I believe Toronto community housing has grown too big. It needs to be restructured completely because a lot of the buildings don't have doors that operate properly. The inspectors don't go to these buildings, they go to the private buildings. And what we need to do is have the same level of standards across the board as we have for the private buildings, and we need to work at a better standard. So breaking up Toronto community housing and Toronto housing itself and allowing non-profits to do a lot of the work that Toronto community housing has taken on will be a step in the right direction. But we have to incorporate the people, the organizations, into the process, and that hasn't happened. Again, it's about unlocking the doors for our city and bringing the people back into the process.
Thank you, candidates.